Okay, I think I'm ready for this. Probably not, but let's just do it. Hello! Today I am very excited to be doing this video that I've been planning, well, actually not planning very well, but that I've been wanting to do for almost a year now, which is to talk about my favorite character archetype and all of the examples of this archetype that I have found so far in fiction. So my favorite character archetype, if you didn't know, is the underdog, and specifically, I really like the self-deprecating underdog character. The underdog character archetype is basically a person who is underprivileged or disadvantaged some way at the beginning of the story, whether it's based on financial or social class type reasons, or age can sometimes come into it. It can be because of their personality, like they're very anxious or unsure of themselves, or they're looked down upon by many other characters in the cast. And that has been the character type that I have gravitated to for most of my life. So now I'd like to share with you my top 8 underdog characters that I have ever read. Let's just get right into this. They're kind of in order of my favorite. They're not in order of the best example of the underdog archetype or anything, because I don't know. That's subjective in my opinion. I think I'm going to do a countdown, and then I'm going to feel bad because I put some characters lower on the list than I wanted to or something. I don't know. A lot of them are kind of the same level. But I'm going to start out with my number 8. Number 8 is Charlie from Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman. Charlie is the son of the trickster god, and the book starts out with Charlie not even knowing that he's the son of the trickster god. Charlie throughout this book is called Fat Charlie because that's what his friends call him, I guess. In my review I wrote, "I love that you spend most of the book agreeing with Fat Charlie and thinking that he's an unfortunate, mundane human being with extreme stage fright," which is basically how he starts out. And then he discovers that he's actually the son of the trickster god, and he consistently sees himself as inadequate compared to the trickster god's other son, Spider, who seems to have all of the powers. Throughout the book, he starts to gain confidence in himself and learn more about himself and his role as the son of the trickster god. By the end of the book, he becomes a lot more self-assured and confident. That is what I remember of Charlie's character and what his development is like. That is why he's on my list of underdog characters. Up next, number 7 on my list is Jaian from and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, it could be Jaian, it could be Jaian, I don't know, from the Far-Salo trilogy. This book is the second book in the Far-Salo trilogy, Rise of a Hero, but it has Jaian on the front cover, which is why I picked it to show you. In this YA high fantasy world, there are 2 groups of people. There are the peasants and there are the Dagons, and the Dagons are like the nobility and also the military people of this country. And Jaian is kind of in between the two because he is the bastard son of the Dagon leader, and that means that he doesn't really fit in with the peasants or with, which is his mother's people, or with the Dagons, and he's kind of looked down upon by the Dagons, but he can't live with the peasants. And because of the disaster that happens in the first book, Fall of a Kingdom, you can probably figure out what happens based on the title, Fall of a Kingdom. He ends up in a position of having to become a leader. That is a big transition for Jaian, and he struggles with it a lot because he has this idea of being inadequate, and also he just is at a disadvantage because of his birth. Yeah, so that's that one. Up next, number 6 on my list, and this is where we get into the middle section of books, which all of them could kind of be on the same level because I love all of these characters pretty much equally. But anyway, number 6 on my list is Adam Parrish from the Raven Cycle. And Adam is my favorite character in the Raven Cycle, and it is probably because he's the underdog of the group. In the beginning, Adam is the scholarship kid at this academy that all of the boys go to. He comes from an abusive home. He has a very abusive father, and that is what he struggles with throughout the first book and continues to struggle with things like that. Now I know that he eventually becomes like the wizard whatever and like he gains power, but he always has this kind of background of an underdog. He also doesn't have the family support that most of the other characters have in these books. So that is why he is an underdog and he is one of my favorites. Okay, number 5 is the only female character that I have in this entire list, and I don't know why that is. It's probably mostly just because there are not a lot of female protagonists in high fantasy and fantasy, which is my favorite, not counting the really badly written YA fantasy, which has a lot of female characters, but that's beside the point. But the next character I want to talk about is Cat Far-rah-fell from the Spirit Walker trilogy. And not only is she a great underdog character, but she's actually an amazing heroine. She is my favorite heroine of all time, actually, in fact. So I will definitely be talking more about her when I do my video about my top favorite heroines, which I will do at some point. But for this, let's just talk about her underdogness. And the reason why I think Cat Far-rah-fell is an underdog is because in the first book, which is this one, her whole adventure is kicked off because she lives with her cousin and her aunt and uncle because her parents are out of the picture for reasons that I don't want to spoil. And her aunt and uncle all of a sudden marry her off to this mage who came to claim her cousin, and they basically married her off in place of her cousin. And so most of this book she's just really confused and hurt and feeling betrayed because her family gave her away, basically, but also she wants to protect her cousin so she doesn't tell anyone she's not B. The main reason why she seems like an underdog archetype, at least in the first book, is because of her being kind of this unknown character who is like sent in place of a person who is more important to her family, their daughter, which makes sense. Anyway, if you've read these books, you know that she becomes, she is very confident and brazen in the way that she acts, so that's doesn't fit with that aspect of what I was talking about, but she is also self-deprecating. She thinks that she has no heart. She consistently says that she has no heart, and even though the reader can constantly see that she loves everyone very much and cares about a lot of people and a lot of things. Anyway, I don't know if any of that made any sense, but I wanted to talk about Cat in this video, and I will definitely be talking about her again when I talk about my favorite heroines. So yeah, that's my number 6 on this. No, that's my number 5 on this list. Up next, number 4 on my top 8 underdog character archetypes, whoops, you just saw it, is Asher from Kingmaker, Kingbreaker, the Kingmaker, Kingbreaker duology by Karen Miller. I actually have the other one here too. And Asher is an underdog archetype because Asher is a simple fisherman on the coast of the Kingdom of Lur. He has nothing special about him, and the only reason why he's thrown out into this entire story is because, as far as I remember, he's on the street of the main city when the prince's procession goes by, and I think the prince's horse like spooks or something, and then Asher calms it down, and then he is thrown into this relationship with the prince and the palace, and they find out that he has a special kind of magic that makes him integral to the entire kingdom, but also he is still seen as basically a peasant because he was a fisherman. So I guess the thing with underdog characters is that when they are the protagonist of the story, like in all of the cases that I've talked about so far, they usually have quite a big arc where they become not the underdog anymore. Sometimes they continue to be the underdog, but they just become more self-confident in themselves, and sometimes, like in this case, they just become super powerful, but not confident in themselves. They turn out to be actually integral to the story because they are the protagonist, and that's how fiction works, but their character is still the underdog archetype, if that makes sense, because of how they started out, like Asher as a fisherman in Lur. Okay, I also want to reread these books sometime because they are so good and they made me cry a lot, I remember. Up next, now this is my number 3. Yes, this is my number 3, but it might actually be the most consistently and most like easy to prove example of an underdog character in fantasy, and that is Maya in The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. So Maya is the protagonist again, but Maya is a goblin in this world of goblins and elves. And as you might expect, the goblins are the lower class in this world. The ruling class, like the royalty, are all elves. But Maya is like the second cousin 5 times removed of someone in the royal family. I don't remember exactly how that family tree works, but he's somehow connected to them. And he was raised by a distant member of the royal family who is a drunk and completely useless, basically, and doesn't teach him anything. So he has all of the disadvantages of being uneducated, complete, like, bottom of the lower class. He's got racial disadvantages because he's a goblin in the world of elf power. And then, by a series of crazy events, he ends up on the throne of the kingdom. That's not really a spoiler because the book is called The Goblin Emperor, so you kind of realize that he's probably going to end up being the emperor, and he doesn't want to be there. That's why his character is the most consistently an underdog, which is that he doesn't want to be on the throne, and also he has no idea what he's doing on the throne. He doesn't know which advisors to listen to. He doesn't know what to do without listening to advisors. And also he's like so precious and naive. All he wants is for everyone in the kingdom to be happy and safe and getting along, and that's just not how court politics work, and he's just constantly upset about the way things are going, and also he thinks that everything is his fault. He blames himself for the things that go wrong in the kingdom when he is the emperor, even though literally none of the nobles will listen to him and do the things that he thinks will make the kingdom better, because he is a goblin and they don't think that he should be on the throne. So Maya is a character who is constantly apologizing for making mistakes because he's uneducated, and really he's doing nothing wrong, and it's not his fault that he was put on the throne in the first place, and he's just a little baby. He's just a little baby, and he's an underdog, and he consistently is, and I love him a lot. And I can't talk sense anymore because of talking about him. So you should read this book. It's really, really good. We're almost done. Number 2. This underdog character is one that I have talked a lot about recently, and maybe you know who it is, but yeah, it's Fitz from the Farseer books, of course. Again, another main character, another protagonist. So far, I have only talked about protagonists who are underdogs. Fitz Chivalry Farseer. This is the 9-book saga that I am currently still working on. I only have 1 book left. Fitz is the bastard son of the king in waiting in the kingdom of the 6 duchies. His father steps aside from his role as the king in waiting. Fitz is taken into the capital, Buck, by the stable master, and he is raised as a stable boy and then as an assassin's apprentice for the current king, Shrewd. But because he is a bastard, and because there is a terrible, awful, evil character named Regal, who is the now king in waiting, he is constantly just bullied by this Regal character, and he is another character that doesn't really fit in any place. Basically, he is underprivileged, and he's an underdog in pretty much every aspect of the word. And even though he is the catalyst of everything that happens in all 9 of these books, he consistently sees himself as being the worst, and he is the most self-deprecating protagonist I have ever read, and after 8 books, I have not gotten tired of it yet. His character arc is really good throughout each trilogy, and even each book. He does learn a lot about himself. Point is, he starts out as an underdog, and he's a pretty consistent underdog, just because even after he's no longer bullied by that person that I was talking about who I hate, even after that whole thing is ended, he kind of just lives in the shadows. He works from the shadows because nobody really knows who he is anymore for most of the rest of the books. Yeah, he's in disguise for a lot of his life as Tom Badgerlock, not as Fitz. Yeah, and I don't know if that was explained very well either, because when I talk about Fitz, I get a little bit emotional. So, anyway. And last but not least, my number 1 favorite underdog character in the entire world, who is also my favorite character of all time in anything ever, is Peregrine Took in The Lord of the Rings, of course. Now, this is an opinion that I have had challenged a couple of times, because it has been pointed out to me several times that Pippin is actually basically the Shire's version of nobility. Like, he's a rich kid, but the thing is, most of the Lord of the Rings does not happen in the Shire. So as soon as Pippin becomes part of the Fellowship, then you see that he's definitely the underdog of the Fellowship, because he's the youngest in the Fellowship. He is the fool of the group, which is, a fool is another character archetype, but I don't think Pippin is that archetype. And he doesn't see himself as being integral to the group, because I don't have this written down, but there are a few times where Pippin is self-deprecating and thinks that he should just not be a part of this quest anymore because the other characters don't. He doesn't think that the other characters think he is important to the quest. Anyway, Pippin is my favorite character of all time. Honestly, at this point, I can't even remember why that initially happened, but it's just, he's got a place in my heart now, and he's not gonna leave. And he is definitely the underdog of the Fellowship. If you look at all the characters of the Fellowship, Pippin is the youngest. Pippin is the one that is most consistently unsure of himself and terrified of what's happening. Even the rest of the hobbits, they kind of push through everything. They don't show a lot of fear. And Pippin does. And Pippin is a little teenager, basically, in Hobbit years. And that's why Pippin is my #1 favorite underdog character and my favorite character in the world. So now that I've talked about all of those things and made absolutely no sense at all, I'm wondering if I should even upload this video. But hopefully some of that made sense. Maybe you also like the underdog character archetype, and if you haven't read any of these books and would like to read more underdogs, then now you have some more book recommendations for that. Why are all of these videos such a mess? I don't know. Anyway, I hope you found this video enjoyable in some way, shape, or form. I think I'm done rambling and making no sense, so I'm going to stop now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!